And let me just bring you the Met statement as regards the vandalising or the theft of that ULEZ camera. This is Detective Superintendent Daniel Smith, whose officers are leading the investigation into ULEZ vandalism. That's plural, officers. They've got more than one person dealing with a nicked camera? Wow. They say, we have been proactively targeting those we suspect of causing or seeking to cause damage. We are carrying out a thorough investigation, and this includes gathering CCTV, speaking to potential witnesses and following up active leads. We're also working with TfL to prevent further offences in the future. Yes, don't vandalise cameras is the advice. Don't go anywhere near. We can understand you might be very much against ULEZ. You might feel enraged by it. You might have spotted a mile off the anti-intellectual nature of the entire scheme. You might feel it in your very bone marrow that this is the wrong thing to do, but vandalising it is just going to end up with you in front of the magistrate, a hefty fine and possibly even going to the chiller for a few weeks. Not worth your time. Let's get another voice on all of this. Leo Murray is co-director of Possible, their campaign group for a zero-carbon society. One of the things I think that gets people about ULEZ is that it doesn't make much sense. That's the problem. This is a very, very expensive scheme that the Mayor is going for to catch something like 8% of motorists who don't fulfil this kind of random criteria. And that 8% naturally will reduce over the coming years anyway. So it seems sledgehammers and nuts to many people.
Well, it's proven to be effective, right? So what's happened, the original central London zone, and I appreciate there is an argument that, it becomes less and less strong, the argument, as you move out from central London. So the original central London zone, halved air pollution, and then the inner London zone, now out to the north and south circular, reducing exposure by about a third. And yes, the impact of doing it to the outer London boroughs will be less good, but most of the less effective. But most of the people who are exposed to illegal levels of air pollution who live in London live in outer London. So it will have an effect.
But air pollution and car pollution are two different things, though.
They are.
I mean, there might be something in the Venn diagram. If you're driving around in a knackered old Allegro from 1983, who knows what horrible old guff that's churning out. But most people aren't doing that. And even, as our previous contributor said, even diesel and petrol engines have air filters, additives that are absolutely tip-top now, unrecognisable from half a dozen years ago. So yes, what are we trying to get here?
Well, we're trying to accelerate that process. So you're absolutely right that the tailpipe emissions from cars have been massively improving in terms of their public health impacts, and that's been a long-term trend. And as a consequence, each car on the road is becoming less dangerous to public health, and that's been going on for a long time. But why has that been happening? That doesn't happen on its own. It happens because of regulation like the ULEZ. So, expanding the ULEZ will dramatically...
But most cars are already... I mean, where can you think of any other government department, Leo, where you'd be allowed to spend hundreds of millions of quid to get 8% of people that will be reduced to about 6% in a year's time and probably to 2% in 2 years' time?
Well, I think...
Well, that's an extraordinary amount of money. And it doesn't even include other forms of air pollution, which is where the real problems are.
Well, I'm not sure that's true, because about half of the exposure to dangerous air pollution is from motor traffic, right? Slightly more than half, and about half of that is private cars. The reason why the ULEZ is supported by public health professionals, hundreds of doctors who work in London wrote to Sadiq Khan the other day asking him to keep his nerve, and it's very good that he has, because of the unacceptable health impacts on children who are growing up in the capital. The reason why it's an effective policy is because the disproportionate amount of the dangerous air pollution that we're breathing is coming from a small proportion of the cars, and that's why this is an effective approach.
Do you really believe that, though, Leo? Do you really think that the reason we've got some kids, having asthma, which, by the way, isn't connected to car fumes, but that's the argument that seems to go around?
It is connected to car fumes.
So people have asthma because of cars?
Yes, I mean, listen.
Who told you that, Leo?
Cause asthma. What it does is it exacerbates. It makes it much more dangerous, so that you're much more likely. I mean, I could read you a quote from a paediatrician who is saying many of the children that I see every week would not be visiting me in hospital if they didn't live in.
But of course, what we're also
doctors, I think, Ian.
Doctors in a specialised area would say that because that is their area. I get that. Doctors who specialise in peanut allergies will probably want to ban peanuts, but we have to have a balance, don't we, in terms of how life rubs along and how it functions. We've got to be realistic about it.
But there's a very strong consensus amongst public health professionals. This is why these policies are coming forward.
So why are we not banning the tube then, where it's God knows what going on down there in terms of carcinogenics?
Yeah, it's the deep line tube lines do have poor air quality.
I mean, horrendous. Far worse than anything you would get if you stood in the middle of the M25 at rush hour.
It's a difficult problem to solve, but I guess what I would say in response to that is, Howard, people have a choice about whether they get on the tube, whereas children do not have a choice about whether or not they're breathing the fumes from other people's dirty cars.
And then, of course, we've got the airports as well. The airports, Sadiq's all right with the airports. He's all right with the tubes. He's even all right with those horrible cars, as long as you pay for it, Leo. So he's fine. He's fine to pollute the kids as long as you pay £12.50.
What I would say in response to that, I'm an environmentalist. I'd like to see bans on them most.
And that would be far more consistent, which is what they've done in Birmingham, I think.
Yeah, but would Howard Cox be supportive of that? I don't think it would make the people who've been angry about this any happier. In all honesty.
Okay.
And at least what he's doing with the revenue. I often see this argument that it's like a cash cow. It's a revenue raising thing. All of the revenue will be spent on expanding and improving bus services in outer London, the areas that the zone has been expanded.
You hope it would do. I've never believed, by the way, I agree with you. I've never believed that it was about a cash cow. I don't think that is. I know some people say that, so I'm with you on that point. I just think it's a bit disingenuous to start talking about. I mean, he makes up figures of death, about premature deaths and stuff like that. When you start to go down that sort of area, there's no truth in any of that, by the way. They're statistical constructs that you can apply to almost anything in life and say somebody died 3 hours statistically before they would have done. That doesn't really count, does it?
You must get the Imperial College researchers for, the team that have produced those estimates.
There are 4,000 people every year dying a premature death because people drive cars. That's not true, Leo.
You should get the team on, because this is science, right? So you should hear from the scientists who actually
all right, listen, on that point we will finish, but thank you, Leo, you're illuminating, and thank you for shining light onto that side of the debate. That's Leo Murray. He's the co-director of Possible.